you're about to see is an episode of Down to Earth with JP, a show where my friend Jonathan Payne gives his thoughts and reviews on the TV show The Chosen. If you want more Chosen-related content, you can go to this channel's page, and we have an entire playlist dedicated to this TV show. In that playlist, you'll find things like other episode reviews, other Down to Earth with JP videos, episode breakdowns, theological breakdowns, scene breakdowns, season prediction videos, episode prediction videos, everything that you could possibly want related to The Chosen, we've got it on this page. Be sure to go check that out. But this isn't my video, this is Jonathan's, so I'm going to hand it over to you, Jonathan.
Hey everyone, welcome back to, now we're in Season 2 of Down to Earth with JP. We're going to be reviewing the first episode of The Chosen, Season 2. It's been a while, but I decided to finally get them out to you. I got my new Chosen Season 2 in the mail, so I figured everyone's going to start watching the show again, and just want to kind of talk you through it and get caught up before Season 3 comes out. But today I have a special guest.
Hello!
Yeah, so I have here with me my girlfriend, Stephanie.
Hello!
Welcome, Stephanie, to the show.
Thanks, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. You know, she caught up with Season 1 not too long ago. We watched it together, and now we're watching. This is her first time to watch the first episode. She hasn't seen any other episodes of Season 2 yet. So I guess I'll start by asking you, what have you thought of the show, Season 1, and this one?
I was really skeptical of just the whole series at first, just because I didn't know how they were going to do it. I thought they were going to be really boring. And then we binge watched, I guess, like one half at a time. I don't remember.
Yeah, we watched like the first half of the
four and then the last
yeah,
four,
with like
our
group from church.
Yeah, and I loved it. I found myself crying in some episodes. And it was just such a great representation of the Gospels and just like the mercy and righteousness of Jesus Christ, and how each of his disciples are so human, and it was just a really great depiction of the humanity of the gospel, and that's what I really liked about it.
Yeah, and we know, of course, it's probably not 100% accurate to what they did.
Of course, yeah.
But I think it does a good job of like being relatable to like kind of current culture and making it something we can see and understand.
Right.
And
it's entertaining.
Yeah. It is. So this episode, we have one of the unique kind of openings. Doesn't happen every episode, but every once in a while they'll do like something from the past, or in this case, they do something in the future.
Forward.
Yeah. So what did you think of that? And I guess what was your take? Did you understand what was happening right off the bat?
No. Yeah, I had no idea what was happening at first, but it made sense as it went on, and I really liked how they, well, I guess we're kind of jumping forward too, because they bookended it with John writing, like he was thinking about his own gospel while Jesus is reading the book of Genesis.
Right. Yeah. Usually the openings are somehow related, and that's how it ties into this episode. But yeah.
But yeah, that was cool.
Yeah.
I liked it.
And you get to see Matthew with his big beard.
Yes. That was my favorite part, actually, how John was asking him how he would, or what his take on everything was, and he said everything so precise, and he's like, it doesn't have to be that precise, and Matthew was like, mine will be.
Yeah. So it's kind of showing you kind of how they got to where they wrote and why they wrote, and their personality behind the Gospels.
Well, and it's also hard now watching a lot of this and seeing the chosen personalities, and then not figuring that in when you're actually reading the Bible.
Yeah. Well, I think it's because it feels accurate. Like that makes sense. So that would be who that is. Yeah. And then one thing we had talked about that I really liked is that it makes reference to the fact that Mary is now John's mother, which is also a future event thing. So just throwing in small things like that you wouldn't know necessarily unless you read the Bible. But if you don't, you haven't read the Bible, this is all new to you. When you get there in Season 7 or whenever it's going to happen, you can look back and be like, oh yeah, that's why that happened in that episode. So
I feel like there's a lot of hidden gems for those. Anyone in any walk of their faith can get something from this. So people that really study the Bible will know all these little hidden details in it, and then you can even just watch all the way through and then go back to the beginning and watch all the way through and see new things that you've never noticed.
Yeah, that's true.
Start reading your Bible and realize, hey, I never realized that before, but I remember this from when I watched In The Chosen.
Yeah.
So, it's cool.
Yeah. And I think they do a good job of putting the scripture into actual conversations. Like something we'll see later on here is Jesus is talking about the sheep and the one left behind, but he brings it up because he's asking if there's any shepherds in the group, and there's a guy, and so it's relatable to the people around him.
Right.
The next thing that it goes to is Rama and Thomas show up. They've been, they were in the first season from the wedding, and
they were looking for Jesus.
Yeah, and they're looking for Jesus, and they've come to Samaria to find him.
Yeah.
And they're with it.
I just have a funny moment before that happens.
Oh, okay.
Well, not a funny moment, but just the fact that Jesus spent his time resting by helping others.
Yes.
I found that just iconic. How do you rest? Oh, I'm an extrovert, so I just hang out with people. Or I'm an introvert, I am by myself. But Jesus is like, I'm a helper, so I rest by helping other people, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. This isn't before you. Go ahead and say your
I was going to say it is after, but that's okay. But yeah, so we see Thomas show up. He is not a disciple yet, but this is kind of how he becomes a disciple. We see that they've been kind of tracking him down, but Rama's father is not too into the idea of them following. Which I kind of like that because it's like a realistic viewpoint. Like if you had a daughter and she wanted to do that, he's like, that's pretty reckless. Like, how can
Let's
you
not follow this strange
man?
Yeah,
just strange man
who has no home
with a lot of other men. Like hardly any women. So you could, and that's why I'm saying it's relatable. You can kind of imagine the situation and why this father wouldn't want his daughter to follow this strange man. So that was cool. But then and then after that they're looking for Jesus. They don't know where he went, and we see that he's actually helping a man repair his cart. So
that's true. Oh, well.
But that part is cool too. I thought it was cool because it shows that he's still using his skills as a carpenter. Like all that stuff his dad taught him growing up, he's still using that to make money. Like they still had to have money for food and all these things. So some of that was donated to them and given to them by people, but part of it was like they worked for the money. So there's just a realistic aspect of it that I don't think we often think of when we're thinking about reading the gospel, because it's just about like salvation and us, but it's related to how this is how they actually live their lives. So I thought that's cool. Seeing all that.
So on that note, when they were all talking about how they've lost Jesus, Thomas says it's like he's making it difficult for people to follow him, which it kind of in a sense is. I mean, it's easy to say, yeah, sure, I want to follow Christ, but to actually walk in obedience with him can be a little difficult.
Yeah.
So I just like that little touch of reality there.
Yeah. Well, and I think we kind of see that. Well, we even saw that last season where with Nicodemus. I don't know if you remember that, but he's a religious leader, But, I mean, that plays into why it's hard for him to follow Jesus, but even someone who has all the background behind why he should do it doesn't want to do it. So... Yeah.
Even when he knows exactly who Jesus is.
Yeah, he's even kind of said out loud that he thinks he's the Messiah, but he still can't do it.
Yeah.
So, having that aspect of it's not an easy decision to make is an important point to make. So.
Yeah, exactly.
So, then the next thing that happens is he goes and he starts teaching, and this is when the disciples finally find him, and he's talking to the crowd, and he starts talking about the parable of the sheep. And they find him there just kind of teaching, and they're just listening to him. But again, this was what we were talking about earlier. It's just kind of cool that it's kind of giving some context behind why he says the random, like sometimes the parables he says, they make sense, but what's the context for him? He's just this kind of shows like, oh, he's asking the crowd, is there a shepherd out there that can understand what I'm about to say or relate to it? And he does the same thing in the first season when he's talking to Simon and his brother about fish, and he's saying like, what do you do like when you throw out the net and all this stuff, so kind of relating to what people can like know. So I thought that was cool. Well,
then people don't really know where he's going, but it's applicable, and he's still trying to teach a message, and that's what all of his parables are about.
Yeah.
This one, because it was more of a conversation, it seemed like, with him calling out the shepherd that was in the crowd and asking him questions about what he would do with his lost sheep, and it's almost like the shepherd was telling us the parable.
Yeah, right.
And just how Jesus worked through all of that, and he controlled that conversation in a way that allowed the shepherd to understand and the rest of the people to understand where he was wanting to go with that. And then he applied that later on with Melech.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when Melech was talking about his past and how he was so broken, and I don't know if you want to go to this point yet.
Well, we can.
Sure. Okay. But yeah, he has such a terrible story and how he's done so many terrible things, and like, how dare Jesus, like, not even, I mean, obviously Jesus knows who he is, but like, how dare he look at someone so dirty and so broken? Because surely Jesus doesn't know who he's looking at if he's actually there and trying to help him. But he's the lost sheep, and he left his flock to come get his lost sheep. Yeah.
And it's also further magnified by the fact that he's Samaritan and they're Jews. So, like, definitely he wouldn't, if he knew what he had done.
I think that's something that I didn't really understand the magnitude of until I started watching The Chosen and reading more into the tension. The tension between the Samaritans and the Jews and how they did not like each other.
Right.
Which obviously we know, like, with the Good Samaritan story, like, obviously they don't like each other. But I didn't know it was this bad.
Right. Yeah.
And that they just were detestable.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why it's so crazy that the first person he told he was the Messiah was a Samaritan, the woman at the well.
Yeah.
So, I was going to say earlier, just another cool time I was thinking of when he's giving a parable in terms of the current company is when he's talking about, he's at the wedding and he's talking to them about what would you do if you were, like, waiting on the host of the wedding, or I forgot the exact wording, but what would you do if they're waiting? You would stand outside with the lamps. And then, but he was doing the same thing. He was asking the people the question, and they were kind of explaining the parable rather than him just, like, saying it all to everyone. So there was people interacting and giving him the point of reference to the parable. So I just really like that they do that in the show.
Yeah.
And then one thing we forgot to talk about in the beginning is John and James are tilling the field, which plays later because it feels like Jesus is kind of building up their pride and getting them really excited about this thing that they did for him. And you're like, why is he just making them so prideful? And they, they're just getting to this point where they think, they think they're the now leaders, and Jesus is saying they're the best of the disciples. And then they go and meet Melech, who they've prepared all this food for, and fix this field, and they're like, oh, he's a Samaritan, like someone actually owns this field, because they had originally thought they were just going to do it for just any random passerby.
Well, and they were angry when they found out that it was a Samaritan.
Yeah.
So even, well, I mean, I touched on this at the beginning too, but how even the disciples still have those human emotions that Jesus has to kind of sift through and calm down. They still struggled with anger a lot, even amongst each other. Like, when I think about the 12 disciples, I just think of 12 best friends that are following Jesus, but they weren't.
But yeah, one cool thing about the theme we see throughout this entire season, you'll see when you watch them, that there's a lot of tension between the disciples in different areas. One of the episodes is just about all of them arguing, basically. And we see a lot of tension with Matthew, because he's a tax collector. So even between them, even though Matthew's a Jew, because he's a tax collector, there's a divide between them and Matthew because of that. So we see some story arc in that direction too. Yeah, so they talk to Melech. Jesus basically helps him understand he already knew all the stuff that he tells him, and that doesn't matter. Like, he's there for them. And then Melech is actually the one sheep out of the 99 that was kind of referenced in the parable earlier. And that's how that ties in. So then they leave, and they go to the house of Fatina and her husband. I guess it's her husband's house, but they go in there, and we have the funny line where he's like, one of the rooms haunted by my grandmother. He's like, oh, Jesus, I'll take that one. So we kind of see that humor side of Jesus. Yeah. And one thing I always think is really cool to think about is, like, humans have humor.
Yeah.
But we're image bearers of God. So, like, we always kind of think, like, oh, God's just the serious... He made us. Like, he made us to have humor. Like, humor obviously belongs to God and to Jesus. So, it's just cool seeing that they include that aspect because, and a lot of things I think Jesus says are not always meant seriously. They're kind of sarcastic or... He has a personality, and that's one really cool thing I like about the show is that they give that personality to Jesus and the disciples.
Yeah.
And so, that's fun. So they stay the night with him, and then they wake up in the morning, and you find out that Melek was healed, and he's jumping up and down, and you got really excited about that. That was pretty cute.
That just gives me chills. It's just so special, like, because, and then, like, going over to Jesus' face, like, Jesus wakes up smiling because he knows what happened.
Yeah.
And just how Jesus has all of the knowledge and power of God, and he just used it in simple ways, just enough to let people know that he is God.
Yeah. And
it's just so special, and how this man was so, like, Jesus could have healed him that night, and then he could have witnessed the joy and the glory of healing this man, but he chose not to, and he just saw him at the synagogue later and just winked at him.
Yeah.
And that's all he needed. Like, Jesus doesn't need he doesn't need us to boost his pride.
Right.
He doesn't have pride.
Yeah.
He's humble.
Yeah. But the thing is, God could be prideful because he's God. Like,
he's allowed to be.
Like, even God has to worship himself because that's like the law. Like, that's just how it is. Like, that's the whole point of creation, right? Yeah. To magnify his power and his glory. But yeah, one cool thing I like about that scene too is John brings up, like, oh, that's so cool, you don't even have to be there. He's like surprised. He's like, well, obviously you should know I don't need to be there. But it also points to this fact that Jesus does miracles in so many different ways. He doesn't just do it the same way every time. It's not like Harry Potter where he casts the same spell and does, know, he can do whatever he wants. And that I think that's so cool to just know, like, there's no limitation to God and to Jesus. And he just, and we're going to see in future seasons and stuff, he's going to heal and do miracles in other ways too. So it's just cool to see. And I've talked to David about this too. I think he did it on purpose to kind of show that, like, he's God. He can do it however he wants, and there doesn't have to be a specific set of words or actions to make it happen. So the next morning, Jesus leaves again. He says he needs some of his own time alone, and we see kind of the pride in John and James building, and they have this whole plan for how they should do things. And we see the disciples arguing about how they should do that, and they take a vote, and they say, no, we don't want to do God's plan. And they get mad, and they go look after Jesus. And they find him, and try and tell him his plan, and these Samaritans show up. And I think they throw rocks at them.
Yeah, they throw rocks at them, spit at them.
Yeah. And so they just get really angry, and you see Jesus holding them back. And I really like this scene because it also shows that Jesus is like the gentle person we think of a lot of the times, but he also has, he's like a parent. Like he
was stern.
Yes, he's stern. Yeah. That's a good word. So I don't know if he got angry at them. He kind of got frustrated with them, but he's not just this nice guy that's just going to let anything happen and say it's okay. Like, he's correcting his disciples, and I think that's a good side to see of Jesus, because I think we don't really discuss that often enough.
Right.
When it comes to Jesus.
Well, and Jesus knew the faults of all of his disciples, too, so he knew that they struggled with pride.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why they needed to go out. Like, Jesus knew they were going to follow.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think so, because the Samaritans pass just as they're coming. Like, it seemed pretty set up, like Jesus had planned this.
Right.
Yeah. It's just cool to see. And then they get their names, Sons of Thunder. And then we get this really cool scene. Jesus is now going to go teach in the synagogue. Oh, there's a guy that shows up. I forgot his name. He's like I forget what he's called.
Sychar?
Yeah, the priest of Sychar.
I don't know if priest is the right word, but...
That sounds right.
Sure.
So he shows up, and he wants Jesus to read from one of the scrolls. And he gets John to go with him. And we get this kind of cool reference to what John was talking about in the beginning when he teaches. But even before that, they're talking kind of about their favorite part of the Torah. And John is saying, like, I like the beginning, Genesis.
Which is fitting.
Yeah, which is
how
he starts his gospel. So it's just a cool scene between him and Jesus.
Yeah.
And then Jesus goes and starts reading it, and we see the flash back to the flash forward.
yeah. And they also mentioned how sad it is that they only have the 5 books, the first 5 books. Yeah.
Yeah.
So all they have is the Torah,
That's
and
true.
so like they're missing out on so much by not having the rest of the Old Testament scrolls.
So he teaches. Melech shows up, and he's healed, and he just sits there, and we kind of conclude. We conclude with John reading his own gospel because he was writing it in the beginning, and that's the whole episode.
Yeah. There's just a big theme of this episode was that we aren't worthy of Jesus at all, but he is who makes us worthy. And so this goes back to the Samaritan, James and John.
Where the Samaritans throwing rocks at them.
Right, and how they were just angry at the Samaritans, and Jesus is like, you think you're any better? You're not.
Yeah.
Like the youth struggling with pride and anger. Yeah. And he just talks about how none of us are worthy.
Right.
Like, they're not worthy, you're not worthy, but here I am for all of you. I'm not just here for the Jews, I'm here for the Samaritans too. Mm-hmm. And just Jesus' grace through all of that, and his sternness, and in correcting his disciples, because they're who's going to continue in spreading his gospel. So they need to know. They need to be set straight. Yeah. First and foremost.
And I think that's something Jesus has to continuously hammer into them.
We're human.
Well, I mean, specifically the Jews, though, because they've always thought they are God's chosen people. So to them, that meant like we're the ones deserving of salvation, not Gentiles or Samaritans. Because they never learned from the Old Testament either. So you know, I think that there's a lot of stubbornness in that, and that's what this episode was kind of trying to show. Yeah. So
humanity.
Yeah.
And the struggle of it all.
So I'm gonna try and get these videos out more often. Hopefully Stephanie can join me for more of them. We'll see.
I can.
I may do some solo ones also, but we'll see y'all in the next one. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
And I'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Whoa. Where do you think you're going? You haven't liked the video yet. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell. Make sure you comment below. Share this video with your family, with your friends, with your coworkers, with strangers. Share it with everybody. Make sure you join the Now Let's Be Honest crew, and we'll see you next time. Be sure to keep a smile on your face and don't let anybody steal your joy.